Hi there. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us in today's webinar. I'd like to do a quick overview of the format of our webinar. Before we go into it, I'd like to just point out to people that if you are having any technical difficulties hearing or with the sound itself, please let us know through our Q&A box or through the chat facility that's available. Okay, so as part of a quick introduction as well, before we go into the details and the contents of the webinar itself, I'd like to do a brief introduction on myself and my colleague, Scott Bolderson, before we kick off. I am Andrew Paw. I work with Protiviti. I've been working with Protiviti for over 12 years now. I work in the technology consulting and business improvement areas, and I primarily focus and specialize in spreadsheet analytics and spreadsheet risk management.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Andy. My name's Scott Bolderson. I'm a managing director with Protiviti. For my sins, I've been helping clients, amongst many other things, with the spreadsheet problem for around 15 years now. So thank you for those that have taken the time to join. So just moving on to the agenda very quickly. What we'd like to take everybody through today is an outline of the spreadsheet problem. There'll be a variety of different experiences on the call. So we'd just like to start at the very beginning with the spreadsheet problem and start to talk about the so what and the scope of that problem. You know, the spreadsheet problem is very relevant to people in many different functions within an organisation, from auditing the spreadsheets and the impact of the spreadsheet problem through to individuals that are responsible for business change and process optimization, and in particular some of those individuals that are in the financial services risk space. We really want to emphasise, though, the opportunity that change can bring around solving the business problem and the lens it provides to improve business processes and realise value from that change. Obviously, we'd like to give you a brief intro into how we can help you. It's obviously, we've helped many organisations over the years, and we'd like you to appreciate what that looks like. But more importantly, show you examples of what that help looks like and some of the problems we've solved through case studies. We'll then have an opportunity to respond to any online questions or any specific questions you have for us, if they are available, but also if you would like those questions to be responded to you as individuals, please do let us know. And then finally, we'll just talk very briefly to some next steps within which there are opportunities for you and your organisations to leverage some of the services that we have and provide an opportunity for you to get involved with solving some of those problems. Thank you.
So we're going to go into, firstly, looking at the spreadsheet problem itself and the drivers for change related to that. So we've seen spreadsheets in the news, and it's apparent that from day to day, we sort of take spreadsheets for granted. Everybody knows about spreadsheets, and everybody knows about how to use them and how to operate them. However, we rarely often see things around what the causes of these problems are in terms of financial reporting or misstatements. Generally, organizations tend to be more discreet about, what is the root cause of those particular errors. But oftentimes we see that actually for our larger organizations and clients we work with, it's primarily down to spreadsheets as well. And you can find some news articles here that we have as examples around some of these spreadsheet errors caused by either mismanagement or misrunning of the spreadsheets or through accidental use of spreadsheets themselves. As an example, we've got a few examples to the right-hand side. We had Fannie Mae with 1.2 billion financial misstatement down to the root causes of spreadsheet errors. We've also got Kodak as well with a severance package which was overpaid by having too many zeros added to the values itself. We also had the London Olympics as well, where due to a spreadsheet and the recording of information, there was an overbooking of seats by over 10,000. So a few things that can cause problems within the arena. And as you can see from the news headlines itself, it's pervasive and it's not isolated to one specific industry or area. it is actually across different industries, different areas, and can have implications and effects for not just financials, but other areas as well, such as reputational risk.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, I think we all recognise these are the big ticket items. These are the big publicised losses, but actually the real impact on cost is around efficiencies, the hours we work into the night, the weekends worked at month end, where really there is opportunity to reduce the likelihood of those sort of events taking place. I'd also like to just allude to the fact that a lot of audit committees now have, in inverted commas, the spreadsheet problem on their agenda. So we're seeing audit committees and audit teams start to understand their approach to quantifying some of the risk associated with spreadsheets. We're also even seeing non-executive director advice groups have NEDs understand the potential risk associated with this problem. So I think over the last 10 years, we've certainly seen a significant increase in awareness, not only from operational individuals, but also audit committees and non-exec boards as well.
What we're going to go into is the so what statement around, we know about spreadsheets, we know that there could potentially be issues, but what's the implications? Does that really matter to us? And why should we care about the problem that we have around spreadsheets? Because with some training, we should be able to manage it. However, it can be a little bit more pervasive than that. We know that at standalone, spreadsheets aren't just a single entity. It can be connected to many different spreadsheets, as this example that we have worked with one of our vendors, Cluster 7, to identify and give a real-life example that we have here. So in this example, we start off with one critical, simple spreadsheet. We know initially that there are numerous other spreadsheets that feed into this one critical spreadsheet. However, through use of technology and through use of the tools that we work with Cluster 7 with, we identified as part of the process more spreadsheets linked and associated with the level 1 tier of spreadsheets that link into our critical spreadsheet itself. Now, through that linked spreadsheets, we were able to identify through the use of the tools that we have around discovery and the risk assessment tools that there are actually lots of different linkages within the network of spreadsheets that we have, as you can see in this example, down to 20-odd different levels of spreadsheets themselves. So as an example, this single spreadsheet, which was at the very top, a business critical spreadsheet, the user thought there was initially 23 other files feeding into it, but actually using technology and working through the different layers of network connections and links within various other spreadsheets that feed into it, we were able to identify that actually there was over 760 odd spreadsheets that fed back up to this single business critical spreadsheet itself. And what's interesting is actually there potentially could have been many more, but some of the tools that we used meant that some of the spreadsheets were locked down with passwords or had network restrictions, so that potentially there could have been more spreadsheets linked to this. So from that sense of things, you can see that it doesn't become a single file that has an issue. It could potentially escalate and spread to many other files that could potentially lead to a larger and wider issue that could be pervasive throughout the organization itself.
Okay. Just like to thank Cluster 7 for allowing us to use that piece of analysis. I think it's a very powerful example of not only the so what, but the potential breadth of the challenge. Let's be frank though, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. Spreadsheets are here to stay. We're never going to get rid of spreadsheets, but I think as an immediate opportunity, there's an ability through the clever use of technologies. I think the nature of spreadsheets, they can be highly complex, highly distributed, and high in volume. I think technology is a very key enabler for a successful change. But we can, whilst we're looking at reducing error, stopping those financial misstatement events, but we can improve productivity through better ease of use, leveraging of design principles. Through that, we see time-saving opportunities, increases in productivity, and ultimately improvements in efficiency of processes. So where we have complex and a high volume use of spreadsheets, actually that could allow us to build core technology functionality, leverage robotics, and the use of other artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies to introduce those efficiencies and cost savings into processes. So I think we need to see it as partly stick, which is reducing risk and improving control, but also there is a definite carrot here that we need to realise where the opportunity might be.
Thank you, Scott. And we'll see in a few of our case studies and examples that actually it's a combination of the two which works really well within organisations that we've previously worked with. And as part of our case study, we'll look at that process and what we did in a little bit more detail next.
So as promised, this is the in the context of that broader problem, which I suspect we're all familiar with. I just want to take you through some offerings that Protiviti has, and it's really just to give you an insight into how an organisation like us can help you. And we really split them into two levels. One is very tactical, which is really about reducing risk and looking to that ease of use opportunity and best design principles. So in there we have and when we say tactical, these are all pretty fast solutions, pretty fast pieces of analysis. We're talking days and weeks rather than months, and are pointed at very specific areas of an organisation. That might be looking at a set of highly critical models in a model risk function. It might be looking at critical finance reconciliation sheets. But really our tactical offerings are around performing a health check on a spreadsheet, so using technology to look at potential areas of error within a spreadsheet, so consistency of formulas that have been manually overwritten, number of linkages, broken linkages. Again, it's about saying to an organisation, look, you've given us 2 or 3 critical spreadsheets. We've done a piece of analysis using both manual and technology, and actually, we may have found some potential errors here, and there's obviously direct value in that. And frankly, I haven't come across a spreadsheet that we've analysed that is critical in nature where we haven't found an error. And I'll come back to the opportunity around a health check right at the very end, because that's where we can start to test some of these solutions and do something that's pretty rapid with the people on the phone. A spreadsheet diagnostic is about looking at how the spreadsheet is designed, looking at how the calculations are performed, and you'll see a really good example of a before and after where through the design of a more efficient spreadsheet, you can start to see real benefits and start to see broader opportunities. And then finally, a lot of what understanding the spreadsheet problem is, understanding how users might control those challenges. It's about education and training. I can't underemphasize the value in educating and raising awareness around the problem, and we offer solutions in there through point training in traditional classrooms environment through to global enterprise-wide CBT programs. So those tactical offerings are very much around solving point-in-time solutions, areas where we know already the business is broken. Our strategic offerings are much more about sustainability. How do we continuously understand, as spreadsheets are created, retired, changed, how do we ensure that we're maintaining a level of control? We're working to better ways of working, and it's about developing a sustainable operating model around how we manage spreadsheets that isn't too cumbersome, that isn't yet another set of activities, but it is about embedding ways of working into an organisation that reduces our risk. So clearly policy development is very important. What are significant spreadsheets? What level of control do we want over the spreadsheets? And that varies by organisation. We clearly need to build an inventory, i.e. what are the critical spreadsheets in our organisation? We've dealt with clients where that could be 100 spreadsheets right up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 spreadsheet models across a global organisation. And clearly, again, that's where technology has a huge benefit. And finally, part of the strategic opportunities we outlined before was about realising benefits over not only controlling spreadsheets, but understanding what the spreadsheets are doing, and therefore how can we introduce efficiencies into our processes, how can we optimise our processes, how can we automate our processes. So a lot of our broader digital offerings would sit in the process improvement space. And again, whenever here I talk about technology, at the moment our trusted partner is Cluster7, and they support us in all of these services, and it's been a very successful partnership over 12 years now. Andy's now going to get into the meat of the presentation, which is really around case studies and examples. So hopefully you get an idea of before and after approaches, some of our collateral, some of our outputs, to hopefully give you a flavour of how organisations are actually solving this problem today. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Scott. So our first case study centres around a global oil and gas client that we had. So several years ago, they came to us with a problem around financial reporting errors arising from the use of complex spreadsheets, leading to financial misstatements, and therefore there was an audit finding against them which they had to rapidly address. And they had to periodically report back to the audit committee around what they were doing, the status of the state of the spreadsheets that were high risk and critical. So we were brought in to help them out as part of the process. One of the things that we did do as part of that was identify gaps against the current policy that they had, make sure that if there were specific areas that they had within the policies, is there anything else against best practice that they were missing, and we needed to sort of add and refine the policy that they had. I'd identify areas of improvements around the spreadsheets themselves by performing a gap analysis of the spreadsheets and doing a diagnostic, which Scott alluded to. And then coupled with that, we then perform some remediation on specific spreadsheets themselves. So for the very critical risk spreadsheets, we took a number of those and applied some of these control standards as well as best practice standards to the spreadsheets themselves, providing them with updated spreadsheets, which we'll touch upon over the next few slides. So through a combination of different types of both gap analysis, or doing our diagnostic, and then performing remediation and training, it allowed us to better manage and control the status spreadsheets that they had. And as part of our sustainable process, they then used technology to be able to track changes within the spreadsheets and define rules which allow them to better manage it.
And I think in that, often our clients, the challenge there is, well, what are our standards? What are our spreadsheet standards? For activities like that, don't worry, we've got general proven best practice standards. Now, you might look to employ those standards within your own organisation or configure them to be relevant to your organisation. But as a piece of point-in-time work, we use those best practice standards.
Okay. So going into the remediation example itself, so this is an example of a before and after we'll cover. So you can see you might be typically recognize a spreadsheet similar to this, where you've got some random color coding or highlighting in the spreadsheets, maybe some numbers which are hard-coded, dotted around the spreadsheet itself, which you might not know what they do specifically. There might be areas where you're not quite sure where inputs or calculations or outputs may be. And also with the actual worksheeting itself, do you know what the labeling or referencing of worksheets are? So for something like this, we would take as part of our remediation process and redesign and redevelop the spreadsheet to align to your standards if you have any, or if not, then we can use our best practice standards and give you guidance on that and how we achieve that. So as part of the update and the remediation, what did we do? Firstly, we added critical information headers within the spreadsheets themselves, so that key areas of worksheets can be explained in detail about what that process is, what calculations and outputs are being performed and produced. We added cell color coding to provide some transparency around where inputs, outputs, calculations and check cells can be. We also updated it by providing and applying the color legends to the cells themselves so that you can clearly see where inputs, outputs and calculations are. And also, we also made sure that we had correct and good labeling throughout the worksheets themselves. Now, it may seem as if it's just a case of, color coding and coloring in cells and moving things around, but actually it does provide transparency and easier for users to follow. And you can imagine, especially for more complex models where you have interconnected spreadsheets, that does take some time and thought around updating and refreshing those spreadsheets as part of that process.
I think as well, Andy, what we've seen is, going into more sensitive areas where ownership of spreadsheets is very personal. I'm thinking the actuarial space, the finance space, the trading space. Often it can take quite a bit to convince those individuals that changing their spreadsheets against best practice is a good thing to do. Clearly when you have that scenario, you will often see instances of key man dependencies and the creation of what we used to call black box spreadsheets. As individuals move on, nobody quite understands what the historical model did. But once people start to see the before and after, often we see we sort of the light bulb moment when people realise that clearly the after is much easier to use, much more transparent, less prone to change, errors, etc., etc. So we also use this as a change management technique to convince people this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. One of the other things that we did as part of that process is also add a spreadsheet overview. So again, it seems very sort of obvious that you should have some sort of instruction or overview within your spreadsheet itself, but actually oftentimes we find that, especially for more complex spreadsheets, there might not be as much information on what the spreadsheet does. So what we've done as part of that process is provide an overview worksheet which slots into your spreadsheets themselves. It doesn't impact the way that it sort of runs. What it does do is document in more detail what the spreadsheet does by including the name of the spreadsheet in terms of things like version controls for it, the owner of the spreadsheet, who is the person responsible for maintaining and running the spreadsheet so that if somebody needs to look at it, then they know who the contact is. Where's the location of the spreadsheet itself, making sure that it is actually on a secure network location or a shared drive which has been protected rather than on somebody's desktop or somebody's My Documents folder itself. Good, clear instructions around how the spreadsheets run, the step-by-step details of it, to provide helps reduce that key person dependency if you've got a well-documented process around what your spreadsheet does, and B, it also provides new joiners an opportunity to read through that information without you continually having to sit and take them through it. They can actually go through and have a go at, reading the information in the spreadsheets and running the spreadsheets as well. We also make sure that we had, a summary of the controls in place and the checks in place so that actually in specific areas of the spreadsheets, as a reviewer, what to be reviewing and checking and cross-checking, making sure that values, reconcile and add up. And also we look at things like clearly defining what the inputs, calculations and outputs are so that it's very obvious and clear where you get your information from, what is actually happening in the spreadsheet itself to avoid that black box situation, and also what are the outputs which, might be used as part of a journal entry or as part of external reporting as well.
I'd just like to add to that, Andy. I think there's two things for me as well. Individual spreadsheet users might look at the potential control burden here, the effort required, but actually that's often case a reasonably simple debate, because actually we do see spreadsheet models that are controlling millions and millions of pounds and dollars, and they do exist, and one would even question whether that should be a part of core functionality. So how you apply some of this control should be dependent on the impact of a potential spreadsheet. We're not saying every single spreadsheet. What we're saying is that there's some really scary spreadsheets out there, and as Andy alluded to earlier on, often that one scary spreadsheet can involve hundreds of others. So we actually believe, well, it's proven that this level of control does add value. But clearly, as we start to understand the attributes of individual spreadsheets, we start to build up that inventory base. And based on the pro forma that's on the screen at the moment, you might select certain attributes to be a part of an inventory, and then you start to see business intelligence in that in terms of why are we taking different approaches with similar processes, why are we taking different approaches in different marketplaces or different countries. So we build up a knowledge base through the central inventory that then allows us to drive process improvement and process change and process automation, as I alluded to earlier.
Okay. Another case study that we have is around a global telecommunications firm that we've worked with. In this particular instance, they had a very complex model which they were being supported by a third party who had developed the model, ran the model for them, and updated any settings or system changes to the model itself. Now, the model relied on several different interconnected spreadsheets and access databases, and as part of a conflict of interest, the third party couldn't support the model anymore. Therefore, we were brought in to firstly identify and assess what the model did as part of understanding and explaining to the clients what the model's been used for and how it operates. And secondly, we were asked to bring in our expertise to perform changes and updates to the model and make sure that any impacts were recognized and documented, so that any changes were controlled and managed as part of that. So as part of this process, we identified changes to the worksheets themselves, providing visual data and links using, again, our Cluster 7 tool to say, okay, what's been changes between two different versions of the same model? Has there been any worksheets that have been deleted? Has there been any worksheets that have been added? Has there been any specific changes to worksheets we know shouldn't be changing? And secondly, we also looked at the impact of the model itself when we updated the settings and system changes within the model, and to make sure that anything that did change could be reconciled back to the specific updates that we performed to the model itself. And again, as part of this process, you can see from some of the screenshots that we have is that we used the technology to provide us with an aid to A, perform the analysis, and B, provide some insights for the clients to say, okay, we've updated the models and this is the impact of it, and make sure that it doesn't then specifically impact anywhere else within the model itself. So it becomes a controlled, processed way of managing the changes within very complex spreadsheets and models, and making sure that information can be documented and digested in an easy manner as well. And as part of this process is also, we help to demystify the model itself by getting rid of that black box view of it, and making sure that they understood the implications of how the model worked, how the changes were being performed, and the impacts that it would have ultimately if any changes happened to the files themselves.
Yeah, and I wouldn't underestimate the concept of black box model. What we've got there is often the models and spreadsheets that have been developed by other individuals that have moved functions or left the organisation. Poor design means there's a lack of clarity over what the spreadsheet is doing, and you think actually therefore people would re-engineer or change so they were clear on what the model's doing. But often in case, again, they're so complex that people are very nervous to do that. And with a number of our clients, we went through an interesting exercise with a bunch of high-risk users to what degree they were willing to sign off personally on the integrity of the spreadsheets and the models they were doing. And there was a surprising number of people that weren't willing to sign off, referencing, these are models we inherited, these are models we took over from other individuals, and we haven't had the time or the bandwidth to go in and really understand the mechanics and the calculation. So it's a concept that's always surprising to us, but it's very real and exists today across many organisations.
Thank you. Our third case study revolves around an energy and utilities client. So basically our client wanted us to help them establish a spreadsheet governance process, performing a gap analysis, and then, again, recommending and helping them with managing spreadsheet risks by introducing best practice to their organization itself. And as part of this process as well, what we did was, firstly, the root cause we found was that the spreadsheet design had led to misuse or misrunning of a spreadsheet, which led to input information being incorrectly copied over from one file to the next, which led to an over $45 million misstatement in one of the subsidiary companies. That subsequently led to a transformation project where they had to re-examine the finance spreadsheets that the organization was using globally. So we were brought in to help them just define, firstly, establish an inventory process around making sure that they knew what their high-risk spreadsheets were, by helping them perform a risk assessment of each of the spreadsheet population, and then saying what was categorized as high risk, medium risk, and lower risk spreadsheets. Secondly, once we had an inventory of spreadsheets that we knew were high risk, looking into each of those high risks and performing a gap analysis against the policies that they had. This allowed us to basically say, well, actually, is there a standard process in place around, how your spreadsheets should be designed and developed? And what we found in this case was actually, no, there wasn't. We found that depending on different teams, they had different levels of skills and knowledge about using and running their financial spreadsheets. We also had different methodologies and processes around use of good practice formulas and functions within Excel itself. As part of that, once we did the gap analysis of each of these spreadsheets and did our health check and diagnostic, we then were able to provide recommendations to specifically improve these spreadsheets that we looked at. And that partly included areas such as potentially getting rid of the spreadsheets because they were far too complicated to be in Excel in the first place, and moving them into databases or business intelligence tools. Secondly, we also looked at any areas where you could actually consolidate a group of spreadsheets that were being used for one business process, and reducing 10 to 15 different spreadsheets down to 4 or 5 more manageable spreadsheets, which were easier to run and which were easier to monitor and update as well. Coupled with that, what we also did was provide training workshops and creating computer-based training for users themselves. So again, this meant that information was more interactive for the users. It was short 1-hour-based computer-based training, which they were able to do within their HR system, and they were able to record the details of who had done the training, if they'd managed to actually pass the training test that we developed for them. And it allowed them to have these defined metrics, which meant that it demonstrated to the stakeholders and senior execs that they were doing something about it, and they've got some specific measurable goals and metrics which they were able to present to the senior execs as well. We also did a series of dashboards as well, which allowed us to report on the specific spreadsheets themselves and the status spreadsheets within specific teams, as well as overall the spreadsheet population within the organization. So that meant that we were able to better monitor and manage the overall risk score and risk levels of the spreadsheets within the organization themselves.
It's quite an interesting concept. It's a Power BI platform. You'll see there on the bottom right image. I accept it might not be completely clear, but actually what we're able to do through the likes of Cluster 7 is provide an indicative score, a measurable level of risk, which is often in the risk community, it's actually quite hard to measure risk and what improved control looks like. So it's an indicator, but what you can see there is actually real data, and it's a tangible lowering of the risk profile associated with those high-risk spreadsheets due to better design, better implementation of spreadsheet controls. It doesn't remove risk clearly, but what it does, it gives a higher degree of comfort that we're making a tangible difference to how we use the spreadsheets. We talked about the health check approximately halfway through the presentation. That really is open to the attendees on this call. You're all from significant global organisations. I can see that from the company names. So what we do is we challenge our clients, to really understand the problem in the context of how they use spreadsheets. So I think, what we're willing to do is offer up, if there are particularly 1 or 2 highly complex spreadsheet models that you're willing to share clearly under NDA, then we would happily perform the health check and provide you the feedback and provide you any particular indications of errors. I think that will help build trust with Protiviti, build trust in the problem and what the solutions might look like. So we're very willing to engage you on that basis, and that's obviously on a complementary basis. So thank you for attending today. Thank you for taking the time. We will get back to the people that have asked the questions. There are a number of people in the organisation that are front and centre with this service offering we have, and many, in fact, nearly all the people you see there in front of you have had experience across a number of years. So if you wish to contact us directly, please feel free to do so. Please reference this webinar, and please do ask any questions that will be held in confidence, obviously. So that's all from us.